A very good evening to everybody watching. Thank you for joining us tonight on the evening review. My name is Toivon Jabela. Tonight on the platform we are joined by Shaun Gariseb. He is here to reflect on a voting process that took place over the last weekend, seeking to remove the chief of the Khomanin traditional community. He's here to reflect on how that process went and what motivates that bold move to remove a traditional leader. Thank you, brother, for making time. This is unprecedented. What is going on here?
No, actually not, Toivo. It is. We are moving. We are moving with the times. Traditional authorities are moving.
Yeah.
But I must put it to you that in 1973 already, the Overherero traditional community had a similar process. In that time already, the Banderu and the Damara traditional house, which was one house then, were two of the oldest and the only one house traditional authorities, and therefore they were very strong. The other traditional authorities had one. You can see in the late, when traditional authorities were becoming degazetted in 1998, you could see one traditional house had like 78 councillors, like the Tamara traditional house, from where today the traditional authorities emanate. But in terms of in the traditional authority context, it is something unprecedented, really.
Yeah. So I know that you came to the platform before, and you have articulated at the time what the issues were against the chief here, to say that there were issues like selling of land to the powerful people, some of whom are not even the community members or members of that community. But here, let's just start with the process. So is this just a community mobilization exercise, or where does the authority to hold an election come from?
Yeah, Toivo, by that time when you had given us an opportunity to explain what was going on, the community had convened a meeting on the 31st. Actually, the community had also convened a meeting on the 24th of July last year, 2024, similar general meeting, and then 31st of January this year, where they took resolutions. In these resolutions, they said two things must be done. First, must to get rid of the chief, and her council must follow, and then there must be an amendment to the customary law, which has been debated for a very long time. Actually, from the very beginning, even in the editor's note of the customary laws that I have here, it is noted by those who ascertained that law at UNAM that this document is, they are just publishers. They are not saying what is being said is right, what is being said is wrong. So it is against that background that a resolution was taken. People like I, because we are activists and we are active in the community, we're just mandated as a steering committee to run this process in accordance with the legal provisions that exist, which is the Traditional Authority Act, the Damara Supreme Law, the laws of the Khomanin people, and the Constitution of the Namibia. So those are the four legal frameworks which we are following, and then the process is 100% going well.
So if questions of legality come, because this is what I see all the time in Namibia, the process, the thing was not properly constituted, and or the people who constituted it didn't have the mandate to do that. So from your perspective, when you cite all these things, you think you went about it the way that it should? Yeah,
that's why we also took a very long time to do this process, because you remember last time I was telling you that through the Ministry of Urban, the line Ministry for Traditional Authorities, we had asked them to conduct an extensive or comprehensive audit, which they are busy with since last year. Because first we were trying to get, when we were consulting the traditional authority, we were first trying to sort these things by saying this is wrong, and we didn't want it to escalate to this level where these things must come out. You must first try to sort your house problems in the house, but later it becomes a problem. Before the house is sold, we must sort. We have to go out there and say, no, my brother wants to sell our house, and these things come out in the public. So unfortunately, we are at that stage. So we have been patient, and we make sure, and we are sure that we have covered all those loopholes that can possibly. You know, people always fight back, and we expect a legal challenge, but on what basis when everything has been covered?
Yeah. How was the referendum or election, whatever you want to call it, took place on Saturday?
Yes.
How was it? Like, I mean, usually sometimes you would have something presided over by the ECN with all these kind of things. In your case, if you can just explain the process that took place there in terms of how transparent it was and avoiding rigging and stuff like that.
Look, Trevor, what we did was, when we studied the Traditional Authorities Act and then our own customary laws, there is no prescribed way of conducting this. We could have simply gone under a tree when we are going to the rural areas, or go to the school and say, write a petition, those for and against. Could have done that. Because you must remember, we have a resolution. We are acting on a resolution from a general meeting. Properly informed the chief. You saw with 1,000 people who were in the streets, where she had written a letter of demand from a law firm. So we went there, informed them properly, gave them time, informed them that there will be a process specifically for this reason. You are informed that you must come there, mobilize your people. If you have any support, mobilize. Because at all times we have been saying this issue is not between two factions in the community or factions in the community. It's the community versus the leadership. Because the community is unhappy with the leadership. And this has been like this for the longest time. The only people who have a different view are the very same people we have a problem with benefiting at our expense, are the ones who are in support of her. Otherwise, in these 2 months that we had given grace period, the leadership could have convened, or her supporters would have convened a meeting and said, no, we disagree with what the so-called concerned group of these people are saying. Because you must remember, because we're in pockets, all the community leaders from those pockets have came together, and they are the ones constituting the steering committee. So we informed, and then we said the process will be conducted by independent people. We wrote to every possible stakeholder, even those that we knew don't partake in these things. ECN, the minister's office, everyone, media, and so forth. Even to the leadership of the churches council, and to the most importantly to that. But we don't have to do that. We can simply just have a process ourselves. So we did that. We informed, we asked for ballot boxes from ECN. They even said, we even asked them if you have a prescribed way. They said there's no prescribed way. We consulted them. We came back. They availed ballot boxes. We wrote to Ministry of Environment. They said, give us meat so that we can give the people the same way it's done everywhere else. They availed meat. And then we informed the chief. She will be given. Because there was no alternative person. There is no alternative person. She will be given an opportunity to speak to her people. So she must just confirm before the 13th, or she can step aside before the 13th, so that we don't waste time with all these logistics. Because as the pockets and some of us, we must just put money together to do this, because these things cost money. So with the process, I think on Thursday, which was a public holiday, those people who were conducting this election, very reputable people in the wider Damara community, well-known people that you can also go and audit if you want, pertaining to this process. We had a live broadcast on our social media pages, where they were also invited. The regional councillor of those of that constituency, who understand what is going on. His office was invited. They were there. They said, people were asking questions. He said the process will go like this. There will be a verification point. People will be verified in accordance with what is in the Traditional Authorities Act, where it says when there is a dispute. If Toivo Jabela comes there and says, I'm Khomanin, and then there is a dispute because Toivo Jabela comes from Okalongo, then there will be a group of elderly people who say, no, but this one, he's married into and he's partaking into our activities. We do know him. He has been part of that. And he will be cleared. It happened. So there was that point, and then there was a registration point where these ballot papers, the ballot papers, obviously, they are not from ECN. They do not do that. We created them with serial, with serial numbers, which can be audited also. And then you go to the registration point, so that everything can speak to each other. We did that so that everything can speak to each other, so that tomorrow if you come and say there were 10 ballot papers, only 7 were used, and 3 must remain in the ballot boxes, which are sealed. And so the process was very, very fair. Rather, I myself must be proud of what my community has done.
And just before you go for a small break, What was the outcome then were the results announced there and then, or are they still pending?
Yeah, the results were announced that evening. That too was recorded live. On the evening, it was announced that 709 ballots were used through the process. And it was very difficult because it took them like 2-3 hours because they had to count and recount, and then they had to record with observers, which, by the way, everybody's observers were invited. The Namibian police, we invited them to just safety and just see that things are proper. So from the 709 votes, only 707 were adopted because 2 ballot papers were taken and the people went with them. I think we were told that you were not eligible because of that verification process, but those ones that were there in S was
Absolutely. We go for a very short break and return with Shaun Gariseb in a minute. We continue the conversation on the evening review with Shaun Gariseb. You said something about there being no alternative. In other words, you are saying you are not advocating, for example, the Hereros now, they have Dr. Hoderi Rako and Professor Kashirwa on the one side, so it's one or the other. In this case, we only have the chief, and you are saying, you're not saying remove her and plant this person in her place.
Yeah.
If the process was to end in such a manner that she's removed, what do you do to maintain the leadership at the top?
Yeah, you see, like what I was saying, we are doing this in accordance with our customary law, and even though the customary law is disputed in the Traditional Authority Act and so forth. So what we are mindful of is the provisions with respect to the removal of a chief. You cannot just come having a chief and then saying, remove this one and put this one. There are guidelines we must follow.
Yeah.
So the mandate says remove and then amend.
Okay.
So with the mandate, we remove a vacuum exists. You see the Dongres, they have an issue because of the process was going well. Now the process becomes challengeable because they make those mistakes. We must remove, and we must go through this process. The position must become vacant. The minister must pronounce himself, be satisfied that we have followed all due process, and then he degazettes. When he degazettes, there is a 21-day grace period where you can appoint an acting chief. I cannot decide that. I'm not the community alone. The community is the wider people. Those people need to be consulted. The community will now then decide. We get an acting chief, of which the chief will now endorse the amendment process, and then after only 24 months will we have a substantial chief, a substantial replacement. If we come with a chief like this, holding a chief in the hand, we are imposing ourselves, and we are just doing exactly what was done, in that we are having a problem with. So we want the process to be fair and the process to be widely consulted. We must also bear in mind that this does not mean this is a government and administrative issue. We are activists for land in Khomas region. This does not by any way hinder or affect our land thirst and need for land. That's why as activists and steering committee, our mandate, when it ends here, it continues in fighting for land. You will remember that there are 2 separate ministries. There is a ministry for land and there is a ministry for this purpose. We are not mixing those things. In the past, people were making this mistake of mixing these things, knocking with the right problems at the wrong door. And then you are told, no, but we are told to wait for a long time, and then you are told we are not the relevant ministry. We are not doing that. We are not mixing that up, and we don't want that to be taken as such. We are dealing with this, the line ministry, with the issue at hand. It doesn't stop our need and our intention to continue fighting for land. And we had meetings with that line ministry, and those ones are ongoing. We had complaints there, and we have investigations also there, and those ones are ongoing.
Yeah. I know that you spoke about being guided by the law, but I want to ask also in terms of succession. because there are two ways in which I have seen Namibian traditional authorities or communities do things. One, and I have my own views about, in fact, I have my disagreements with both systems, certain aspects of those. In the Andonga traditional community, for example, they follow a lineage of the royal family. And I have an issue with that because at one point in time, the next person in line, just like they do in England now, the next king of England is already known. Now with the old man also being sick and all that. My disagreement with that way of doing things is that sometimes the next in line is just a guy who is either he steals or he's a drunkard or has no moral uprightness. But there's also one within the Herero community, for example, which I think is more, for me, is more in the times that we are in, where they say Chief Vekwiru Rocco was elected by the community. There's a process that follows, irrespective of whether you are from the royal family or not. Within your community here, how did the chief actually ascend first? Maybe do you remember?
Yeah, I do, 100%. The chief ascended in controversial circumstances. That's why there was a dispute already. But it's a good question, and I must give context to it. The traditional authorities, are things of 2002, and they were stabilized in 2012. Like I was saying, we have a Damara Supreme Law.
Yeah.
There's a Damara Supreme Law. This law and this chief, the supreme leader, Justus Garwe, he is the one who enabled all these traditional authority leaders because they belonged to the Damara traditional house. They belong to the Damara traditional house. And if you go to the to customs of the Damara traditional community, you will realize that, or you will see even in this document that the recording of chiefs go as far back as 13 or 1610 there. If you look at the sequence of leaders, there is no Gariseb, from the current leader, Justus Garweb. There is no Garweb from there. It is Naribab, it is Koreseb, it goes like that. So it's very clear, even in the Supreme Law, it is very clear that there was no bloodline succession. There was no bloodline succession. Even with Justus Garweb, before him there was Koreseb and Koreseb's father. So it just goes like that. It just, you go and say Kuruseb, the surnames differ. The people differ. If you come to the Khomanin, because the Khomanin, they were clans. They were regarded as a clan. They fell under the Damara traditional house. And then the eldest chief they remember was Methusalem Khamsep and his father before that. After that, there was Fritz Gariseb. And after Fritz Gariseb, there was a vacuum. And then it became Governor, the father of the current chief. And then he was the one who said his daughter must follow. Now, in the customary law of the Khomanin that is adopted, and you must remember these things were academic exercises at UNAM by those professors just for the purpose of gauging how these communities are. That's why you find these things are disputed because the customs are not the reality of the people. And there's a case that is standing. That one is Van Brede versus Jacobs, which says that for a custom to be adopted and to stand in court, it must be something that has been done for generations. You cannot start something in 2012 at your house just because that time we were there and say, these are the customs of the Khomanin traditional authority. Because you must remember, people were doing these things for the purpose of getting recognized. Yes. So that's why there is a dispute on the customary law. And even there is provision in the Traditional Authority Act that if there are disputes about customs, the community has the right to amend them. And that is exactly what is happening. So that thing is causing a problem, and people think succession is a life thing, you cannot be removed. That is not true. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, because that is my issue. I mean, look, you can't just say we are the owners of this community, like we are just your subjects.
Exactly.
There ought to be, if you are a good leader, we can subject ourselves under your authority, but when you misbehave and think you are entitled to leaders for eternity, it becomes a bit of a controversy. Maybe for those that are viewing this subject for the first time, you said What are the exact discontents with the leadership?
Look, the discontent does not just, you sometimes don't have a problem with people. If you say Trevo is our leader, we see, but it's been for years, 15 years. No meetings, no transparency. When we ask how land allocations are done, no answers. When we invite you to meetings, nothing. Financial reports, nothing. In fact, when we went to ask for meat, we hear that meat has been requested for every year several times. And the ministry requires of you to declare that, to inform the community that I got meat from Danfeljun for the purpose of the community, not forthcoming. We had an 80-year-old speaking at Dolam saying that I live near the chief, even when we have funeral in Dolam. She doesn't extend to us. What kind of leader is that? So selling of land at the expense of 80-year-olds like that, and then while an 80-year-old is crying for land, a member of parliament must come and get land just because he's saying, I want to have chickens and I can pay the 600. The 80-year-old is also having 600. Who is carrying more value to the Khomanin community? Is that family tree, that 80-year-old? Because it's that person which we must learn values, customs, and traditions from. But if that person is suppressed and it is left to age and die in urban Windhoek in Katutura at the expense of a young boy who is coming from the north, it is very painful for that. So these are the problems we are having with the chief over a long. It's not just land. It is financial reports, things that we have asked. That's why we went into an audit, and it is disrespect towards the community. There's just no respect. There's just nothing. And sometimes we were also feeling, what's the point in having a traditional authority when they do not care with their people? Then it's just waste of government resources by extending and giving donations and sponsors to these people who are only having it for their family. It's just a group of 5 people who are they are just relying on recognition from government. This is similar to what was happening at Black Africa, where people were just having recognition, but they can't even call a meeting. The last meeting they called in Windhoek, 39 people attended that meeting. 39! That is the only meeting that they have called in Windhoek in the 15 years that they have been in existence. Further than that, they've never called a meeting. They do not have anybody supporting them. Even their own family is divided. Even the traditional authority, by the way, we have support from traditional authority leaders, and we have it on record, and it is also a requirement which we are having.
Well, what's in it for you, man? You seem very passionate about this fight to remove the chief.
When I grew up, when I was at varsity people were saying, I'm going to the reservoir, I'm going to the village. I did not understand. I did not understand when people were saying, I'm going every time. When I was with my friend Kadila, he was always telling me, we are going to the north. Oh, you Damaras, you are just saying, we are joking like that. But the thing is, it's the reality, and it is as a result of the land disposition. It comes from 1885. 1885, 1915, the Boers come, and then independence come. At independence, we are failed by our leaders, and then the land stays there with the people, and now we are landless. We're generational farm workers. Our elders must work, come back to Windhoek. When it is December, when you are going to Okalongo, we must sit around trees with camping chairs or go to Swakopmund. I don't want to continue doing that. That is what is in for me. It's a Khomanin.
As a Khomanin.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe just finally on the last 2 places, Nousport and
Bomgatsbroom, yeah.
Yes. You say that will be the next stop as far as this exercise is concerned.
Yeah. The exercise will continue like this. Nousport, those are pockets, Bomgatsbroom, Kanahas, and then there is farm for sales. There are Khomanin people there. Yeah. Areas where we cannot reach, the people are allowed to write, petitions in support or against. Yeah. We just want to be as fair as possible. We want to demonstrate that there's no division in the community and everything is fair. I also want to put it on record that we do not have anything personal against the people. It is governance that we are trying to correct. It is the future of our children that we are trying to correct, and the claim that we have as Khomanin people, as indigenous people of this country and this region, that we want to protect there. If you go out there, 2,000 farms, we are only having 8,000 hectares. 8,000 hectares from 2,000, and those 8,000 hectares are Korasi Plus, which was just recently given. Arofle, where the chief was gazetted initially and in violation, where she doesn't stay, which is also a ground of removal on its own alone. Those are the only 2 places that we can say we have claim to, because those are the gazetted one. That cannot be fair. 2,000 farms, just two small farms that you have. It cannot be fair. We need to do this better. We need to go back, finish this thing, and go back in fighting for more farms and more land, so that we can restore the dignity of the Khomanin people, so that these elderly people who are 80 years, 70 years, can go into those farms, and we young people can learn at least what they knew from their grandparents, and impart that in us, so that we can give this for Kendanis and other young children to take from us. That's what's up.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, Teo.
Yeah, that is Shaun Gariseb speaking to us about the current ongoing referendum on whether to keep the chief of the Khomanin or to remove her. Just reflecting on that process. Thank you for watching.